Hi everybody, Lloyd Moyer here. I've just made this little 6-inch diameter maple bowl that's 6 inches, 150 millimeter diameter bowl here. It was rough turned and set to dry, and so I just finished it. And that's what you're going to see today in this video. Today I have this little piece of maple that's been drying for a few months. That we're just going to see how we finish out. This is going to need, okay. So what I'm going to do first is, actually what I'm going to do first is look at the camera angle and make sure I like it. But I'm going to turn a ridge on the inside here so that I can turn the chuck around, or turn the bowl around and grip it in the chuck and get the inside. So that's what we're going to do first. And we're turning it about a little less than 1400. While I'm at it, I'm just going to true up the rim here. Okay. Coming around to check the camera angle. I think that's pretty good, actually. Give it a shot. So that's all I do. I just turn a little recess on the inside of the bowl so that I can then come around here and turn it around and do the whole outside. This piece, I think I'm gonna put this in slightly smaller jaws. So I'll return the bottom. So first I'm gonna flatten it out, true it up. I'm going to do that with my 1/2-inch spindle gouge, just a little bit too high. As you can see, maple, I think this is silver maple, really cuts nicely. This is quite dry. That's all around. Let's try this. So now what I'm going to do is get my dividers that are set to my, not my largest chuck, but my next one down. And I'm going to mark the diameter of the chuck so that when I finish this, I'm going to finish the whole outside and turn it around and put it in the chuck. And if it's just the right size, I'll be able to take the bowl out of the chuck without marking the foot that I'm going to make. And I'm doing this with these dividers, and you want to make the scratch with the left-hand side and line it up with the right without touching the right-hand side to the wood. Okay. Just have to make sure that the bottom of the foot is concave so that it sits on the outside rim of the foot. And to do that, I sometimes will take and actually dig out the very middle a little bit. It looks decorative too, which is kind of neat. A couple of little decorative things in there, never hurts. Something interesting when people pick it up and look at the inside or look at the bottom. It's a little bit spalted, but still just cuts beautifully. So, I mean, that's with the scraper, which if you get the right wood and you're just sort of stroking the surface with the scraper, it's such a beautiful cut. I'm just trying to get the curve right here. I often make my bowls have something going on at the rim. I sometimes worry that that's a lack of creativity on my part. But it always just, if I don't do it, it always feels like the bowl is unfinished. Like I just got to the rim and went, up, there we go. I guess I ran out of space here. Whereas when I put a little bead on it like this, and go to my smaller detail gouge. When I put a little bead on it like this, or a couple of little grooves, without overdoing it, it looks like I did it on purpose. Like I meant to make it shaped like this. I meant to make it this high. So gives you a little bit of something to focus on when you pick it up. Gives me a little bit of a design challenge. All these things. that's it. I'm going to start this with 180 grit. Turn on the extractor. I often start with 120 grit, but sometimes when I get a really nice cut off the tool, I start with 180 and see how it goes. Don't be afraid to go backwards in grit if you need to. If you're not getting the finish that you want with 180, which I'm not, I'm going to go back to 120. Especially with wood like this maple that finishes so beautifully. Like, give it its due. You know, you don't finish it nicely. Your turning skill, your design skill, all gets overlooked because the finishing isn't great. So make sure your finish is well done. Got to make sure everything melds together. I mean, if you don't have a good design, it doesn't matter how good your finish is either. That's from a screw or a nail or something that was in the wood. Little bug holes, which never bother me. And this has a little bit of figure going through it too that you might be able to see. 180 grit is dull. Never try and make your sandpaper last longer than it should. When it's dull, get another piece. If you're interested in wood turning, and if you're watching me, you probably are, I really recommend going out and finding Richard Raffin's book, The Art of Turned Bowls. It is my Bible for wood turning design. I often think to myself, WWRD, what would Raffin do? And of course, what Raffin would do is something that, something totally inexplicable that none of us could really imagine and make it look like it's the easiest thing in the world. Skip the grit there. But go out and get his book, The Art of Turned Bowls. It is, first of all, it's not about the technique of wood turning, which there are lots of great books, including by him, about. It is about thinking about the shape of the bowl and the design of the bowl and how to make that your work beautiful and long lasting. It's about proportion and shape and the relativity between the inside curve and the outside curve and finishes, and I read it a couple of times a year. Well, I haven't read it in a couple of years now, but I've read it. I must have read it 10 or 12 times, and I go back to it like a reference. Really changed the way that I think about this craft. Paying attention. One of the things I always go back to is, I think I've said in another video. He he said once, if your bowl is truly going to be pretty, imagine it painted matte black. The bowl has to be pretty, even if it's painted matte black. Meaning, um, if your bowl is not shaped well, no amount of fancy grain or beads or beautiful color in the wood or um, things like that, nothing's ever going to save it if it's a clunky shape. Um, but if it is a beautiful shape, then um, none of the other stuff, if it's a beautiful shape, it will be a beautiful bowl, even if it's painted matte black. He doesn't recommend painting bowls matte black. Although I've seen some like that and they can be really cool. This is first I started with Mahoney's walnut oil, and this is Mahoney's walnut oil and beeswax blend. Walnut oil is food safe, and it is a harder and heartier finish than like a mineral oil or a boiled linseed oil, which washes off. The walnut oil gives you a slightly stickier, gummier, thicker finish, a harder finish. When you're expanded into the rim of the bowl, make sure when you're taking the bowl off that you're moving the chuck in the right direction so that you don't open it more and split the piece that you just took a long time making look pretty. A little big. I may need to reverse this into the jaws again when I'm finished and clean up some chuck marks. Okay. Hollowing out. I'm going to use my smaller bowl gouge just to get some of the weight out of here. I'm going to employ my depth gauge here. What I'm going to do is do it like that. So I don't want a whole lot of depth in here, in other words. What that looks like to me. What did I do with my scraper? So my smaller bowl scraper here. When I talk about having a consistent wall thickness rather than a completely even wall thickness, the difference there is I don't need this inside curve to exactly match this slightly rounded out curve on the outside. I just want it to be consistent so that they flow nicely together. I think I'm going to use. That being said, I do want to go in a little bit here. And I am probably in your way. Very slightly undercut here. As I'm sure you see, I'm using my smaller bowl gouge, deep fluted bowl gouge that is not in a handle. I could switch it out with one of my other tools. My other bowl gouges are all in interchangeable handles, but I use this for small work like this, so I find I don't need a whole lot of leverage. I'm just trying to get a consistent wall thickness here. So that the inner wall is undercut to match the outer wall, even though it doesn't go entirely out as far. And then the challenge is getting the inner wall to match up with the floor of the bowl without going too deep. And I'm usually over top of this tool much more, but I'm trying to give you a good view here. I hope I am. I think I'm going to use my larger bowl scraper. This tool is so big it sometimes feels like overkill, but I can still get a very gentle cut out of it. two secrets with using a scraper in general. I'm sure there are many more secrets, but the really important things to me that I have learned over the last several years as I've tried to get better at using a scraper is you've got to take a really light, gentle cut. Even if you're cutting hard, it's got to be a careful, deliberate, gentle cut. And you have to go slow. Still, you still feel a little bit thick in the bottom here. I'm a great proponent in, if you're not gonna try and make your bowl deep enough and you chicken out and leave too much in the bottom, um, well, try not to do that. I would rather go through the bottom and ruin the bowl than leave too much in it. Because if you leave too much in it, you don't learn anything. You don't get any better. And I for one am always trying to get a little better and do a little better with this because I'm not, well, I don't buy exotics and things like that. This piece of wood that I'm turning is something that I literally picked up on the side of the road. So it didn't cost me anything. So if I ruin it, I'm not out anything. I still got to turn it. I still got to make shavings. It was still fun. I still got practice, and I'm not out anything. Whereas I feel like if I turn an inferior bowl, I do a worse job than what I'm capable of, then I wasted my time. I didn't try and get any better. Maybe that's a philosophy. I don't know. If you never mess up, you never learn anything. How are you going to learn from your mistakes if you don't make any mistakes? Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I try to make mistakes, but you got to push yourself a little bit. You got to say, gee, this doesn't feel like it's quite right. Let's try and make it just right. And if in the process of doing that, you get it really wrong, well, you found the edge. You found the outside. You figured out what was too much. I think that the value of that lesson learned is more valuable than what you'd sell an inferior bowl for. And I feel like I'm pushing it with this one, I got to tell you. It just feels a little clunky in the bottom still. I feel like I'm not doing it right. I was in high school on Monday mornings. they would talk about the sports over the weekend, the school sports over the weekend. They wouldn't talk about winning and losing. They'd talk about winners and learners, which was sort of tongue in cheek. It wasn't serious. But like when you lose, when you get it wrong, yeah, you ought to be learning something. If you're not learning something, you're not doing it right. I think that feels okay to me. So that's where we're going to hold on. I'm going to check with my calipers here. Yeah, I think I'm okay. I think I'm okay. Yeah, I'm fine. Not going to mess with it any more than that. See, you can do it well and push the envelope. That doesn't mean I'm not going to try and go through the bottom. All right. $120 grit. One of the things I really like about this maple is it doesn't require a ton of sanding. Nobody likes sanding. I wouldn't think that you like watching it any more than I like doing it. I'm going to take a quick pass with the power sander here. Power sander was 180 grit, but I'm just going to go over the rim here with the 180 again. 220. And 320. This rag already has a good amount of oil and wax in it. Been using it for a little while, so there's a good amount that's just sort of sitting in there anyway. So I'm not a great one for the YouTube generation, even though that is the platform I'm using here. So I'm somewhat terrified of the phrase like and subscribe. But if you're enjoying my videos, go ahead and like it and subscribe and see what I post later. I think there are some tiny little dents from the chuck in the foot here, but they're really not noticeable. So I'm not going to do anything with them. I'm not going to take them off. There it is. If you got any questions, leave me a comment.